Morning. I'm Casey. This is Keystone Curiosity, where we talk about all things unique to the state of Pennsylvania. And this really bothers me. So today we're going to be talking about the history that was removed from the President's House at Independence National Park. So for those of you who are unaware, on Thursday, January 22nd of 2026, crews from the National Park Service took action to remove plaques and descriptive panels from certain sections of Independence National Park in Philadelphia.
This action seems to be in compliance with the current administration's executive order on March 27th of 2025, restoring truth and sanity to American history, which directs the State of Interior to take action as appropriate and consistent with applicable law to ensure that all public monuments, memorials, statues, markers, or similar properties within the Department of the Interior's jurisdiction do not contain descriptions, depictions, or other content that inappropriately disparage Americans past or living, including persons living in colonial times, and instead focus on the greatness of the achievements and progress of the American people.
And with that very legal description of why, it does lead me to the obvious question of what exactly was on these panels in the first place. Normally in my videos I talk about the history and significance of the places that I go and see, and I have actually been here before. It's literally right outside the Liberty Bell Center, which I've done a video about previously. But I'm not going to do that today. I'm upset about the censoring of any kind of history, which means that I have to admit that I'm probably biased. Instead, what I'm going to do is show you the panels themselves. I'll give you a bit of a brief description as to what's actually on them, but I implore you, please, pause the video, zoom in, and read what they say for yourself, because forming your own opinions is the best way to defend the history that there is in front of you.
The first panels I want to bring up are the ones detailing the archaeology and establishment of the President's House as a historic site. The panel titled The Executive Branch tells how the city of Philadelphia ended up as our nation's capital before the completion of Washington, D.C. in 1800, and that our first two presidents, George Washington and John Adams, would take up residence here at the President's House, a short distance from Independence Hall. The rest of this panel brings up the struggles faced by the executive branch during those years, including the establishment of the First Bank of the United States, the Whiskey Rebellion, legislative acts including the Alien Act, the Sedition Act, and the Naturalization Act, and also how the government handled relations with the Native nations. The signs summarizing the establishment of the President's House as a part of the National Park Service bring up how the house was torn down in 1832 and how public interest from the city of Philadelphia led to the creation of the exhibit. Overlooking the excavation site were multiple panels detailing the archaeology and work done on site to reveal and preserve the foundations of the house. Some of them also discuss documents that helped historians understand the layout of the house and the things that were here. And some parts highlight the contradiction of liberty for all whilst being an example of a slave society. The big headline controversy over this event involves the next two panels, titled The Dirty Business of Slavery and Life Under Slavery, which talks about exactly what you'd expect from those titles. The Dirty Business describes the Atlantic slave trade and how it developed and progressed into the economy of slavery, how the institution shaped federal legislation as slavery grew in many parts, and declined slowly in others before being violently defended and ultimately ended after the American Civil War. Where the Dirty Business talked about the grand scale of slavery, Life Under Slavery focuses more on the human side of the issue. It describes the trauma faced by millions in being taken from their homes, treated as cargo to be sold, and the conditions faced under their bondage. This includes both life on plantations and life here in Philadelphia. It also talks about the ways in which the enslaved went about becoming free, from the laws instituted by different states to the various ways of self-emancipation prior to the American Civil War. The final large panels walk visitors through a rough timeline of the house and property, as well as discussing the people one might see in the house, including the two presidents who lived there, dignitaries and ambassadors that would have been entertained by the presidents themselves, and the house's staff, which did include people both free and enslaved. It also goes into more details on the slaves living here during Washington's time, and brings up the conflict within our first president over the issue itself. Several smaller, more artistic panels surrounded the walls, telling more of the people within the house, while depicting scenes from their lives. They show parts of the political struggles faced by George Washington and John Adams. Washington's household servants that he had brought with him to the house, one of which was Ona Judge, who was one of Washington's slaves that escaped to New Hampshire while serving at the house. Hercules Posey, Washington's head chef who would later escape from Mount Vernon, the tide of refugees from Haiti, as well as scenes from the lives of the free Africans who lived in Philadelphia. Also depicted are scenes involving the injustices of the Fugitive Slave Act, which was heavily abused by Southern slave owners. Other panels show scenes from communities nearby, and the combination of all of these serve as a memorial to the people, both free and enslaved, of the United States of America.
And that's it. That's what's on these panels. I couldn't tell you why, but I will admit that I was a little uncomfortable reading some of the things it had to say. But I believe that's a good thing, and an important thing. History does not care about my feelings, and it is very often uncomfortable. But then again, learning lessons usually is. Now, to be clear, no student of history will ever read the negative parts of George Washington's life as though it was a definition of him as a whole. Me personally, I actually like seeing this side of our greatest founding father, as it puts him as not some unassailable icon, but just as a human being, like you and me. Just doing the best that we could with the time that we have and the constraints that are upon us. And in his case, still being pretty damn good at it. Now, I equate a lot of the things that are in these panels to similar to the parts of my own past that I cringe to look back on. There are lessons that I am grateful for now, but I am rather ashamed to admit that I had to learn them in that particular way. This history is important to remember for exactly the same kinds of reasons, because they help us to grow. In order to form a more perfect union, we need to be able to look back and understand the mistakes of our forebears, to learn the lessons of those who came before us, and not make them again. Please check out the link in the description below. It'll take you to pictures of the panels themselves, and again, I implore you, read them. Form your own opinions. Do not just take my word for it. This renovation is still ongoing, so whatever those panels are replaced with, I do intend to do a video about that at some point later on. But in the meantime, thank you all very much for watching.